welcome back to Make Bank with Mia Banks. My name is Mia Banks. I'm your host, and I have a very special guest today. Her name is Cristin Reid. Let me tell you a little bit about her. So, Cristin is the chairman and CEO of Capital National Bank. Prior to serving as the head of the bank, she was corporate president of Capital Bank Corporation. Cristin is also the managing director for Onset Bidco Adventure Capital Company. She actually studied biology at Kalamazoo College and earned her MBA in finance at the University of Michigan. Cristin also received her law degree from the University of Toledo College of Law. Welcome to Make Bank with Mia Banks. I'm so happy to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Something that we actually have in common is that your dad founded a bank. My dad also founded a bank, and he taught me a lot about finance since I was young. He taught me everything that I know, and I think that you have a similar experience. How was your father a big influence on you growing up?
Well, we do have that in common. And what we also have in common is that it wasn't our father's first occupation. They did things before starting a bank. My dad didn't start his first bank till he was 40. And so for me growing up, he was a huge influence. He still is a huge influence. Um, but equal to his influence was that of my mother's. Uh, I was and am very blessed to have two parents that were both very passionate about what they did in life for their careers and worked hard to achieve that and kind of passed their work ethic and need for accomplishment down to me. My dad in the banking industry that started not till I was late in high school, but he was a litigator for the first portion of when I was growing up, and so I got to watch him not only use his God-given gifts, but kind of will his way to success through perseverance and preparedness and tenacity. And then I had my mom on the flip side, who is an artist and just an incredible potter. And she, poured herself into that and honestly is probably the most competitive person I know. But they really complemented each other well. And my mom is a really analytical person. And so, we would be in business with my dad as I was a young professional and still embarrassingly now I still have to ask his opinion about everything. When I had an issue, I'd call my dad and ask what he thought, and then I'd hang up and I'd call my mom. And they usually had the same input or it got me to the right answer. But, I've been very lucky to have two incredible role models that have helped me and inspired me in both finance and in my work life.
What would you say to someone who maybe doesn't have that great of an influence in their lives?
I think it's so important to find someone that you can use as a mentor, whether formally or informally, whether it's a teacher, a coach, or reaching out to someone, in an industry that you're interested in. I mean, I like it when people reach out to me because I love what I do. So it gives me the opportunity to share with people, what I love. And I think there's a lot of people out there that if you don't have someone that are actually happy to be sought out by a younger person that wants to learn. So I think it's important they find someone that gives them that sense of direction and puts on them an expectation of success, which is helpful.
Right. I totally agree. I totally agree. Um, so something that's really interesting is that you majored in biology in college and you don't really do anything biology related now. What kind of led to that shift? What what's the deal there? I'm interested.
Well, so my parents never pushed me in a particular direction. They just pushed me and said, "Hey," they said this to my siblings and I, "You guys all have to have doctorates in something." And, you don't get exposed to much in high school. So I liked science and I decided to be a biology major. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. But I can't honestly tell you if I finished college as a biology major because I loved it or out of just sheer stubbornness because I said I was going to do it. So I just decided to do it. But,
Right.
I wouldn't do it another way because it was a great background to have before I went to law school. Um, I changed not to my senior year of college, I decided I wanted to go to law school. And, that was probably the most formative part of my education was going to law school because it really teaches you a different way of thinking. So I'm glad I did that, but I'm also glad I did it with a science background rather than a traditional poli sci or something else.
Right. I think something that's really interesting, not only about you, but about a lot of guests on the show, is that they have a bunch of different backgrounds. Not all of them started in business and ended in business. A lot of them have done other things that have contributed or even inspired and helped them in their careers. And it just shows how business can take on a lot of different shapes and forms, which I think is super interesting. Something that I want to touch on is you said that you had your law degree. How has that helped you in your business?
Well, my law degree was kind of the dominant. I practiced law for a couple of years when I got out of law school. And then when I started getting into business, I worked for a venture capital type company. And, I worked a little bit on the legal side and did securities work. So I used the legal path into learning about business. And it teaches you a different way of thinking. And probably the most important thing I tell people that I work with that I think law school gives you is the knowledge that the answer isn't as important as the question. Knowing what question to ask and knowing to ask the questions is what's going to help you to learn and to become successful and get that information. Um, and that is something that you learn in law school. And it's really important for people to not be afraid to ask questions and to use that as a part of the learning process.
So, shifting gears a little bit to the social side of things, being a female in finance, have you encountered any challenges being in a male dominated industry? Um, how is your experience as a female crucial to your overall experience in business?
I used to deny that there was a difference, when I was young. I'm just like, people just need to put their head down and do their own thing and not worry about it. And if you work hard, you'll be treated equally. Um, and I have to admit, because I worked for my dad, I didn't have this, I had him in my corner, so it probably made things, well, for sure, it made things easier for me. But as I look back, the last couple of years, the things that have gone on and the movement to acknowledging the deficiency that has been present for a long time kind of caused me to reflect. And I'm like, you know what? There has been a disparity in how I've been treated, as well as I've seen other women been treated, where if they don't fit the stereotype or mold that you have in your head is the type of person that's supposed to fill that role, they're discounted. But one of the most frustrating things from my perspective, I'm not sure if that's the right word or not, but as a woman, if you come into the room and you have a strong opinion and you're very well prepared, and if you're a bit aggressive, then people kind of take offense to that. And you're like, well, she's bossy or she's this,
Mhm.
or it's viewed as a negative whether they articulate it or not. But if a man came into the room with those same commentary and the same attitude, they'd be like, well, he's a go-getter. And
Right.
that to me is is frustrating. And I don't want to say I face that a lot because I've been lucky to work with a lot of very good and open-minded people, but I have faced it at times. And that's kind of frustrating. That's where you kind of feel a difference in how you're perceived.
It almost kind of contributes to why I think a lot of females walk into a room with such an apologetic nature. I think that constantly feel like we have to apologize every time we say something and we can't have super strong opinions because society kind of tells us not to. It tells us, oh, you're being too assertive, you're being bossy, like you had said. But I think that since we're not necessarily our confidence isn't celebrated, it's kind of seen as being bossy and being stuck up or being loud. I think that that really does have a true effect on our overall confidence. So I think my question to you would be how do you kind of push confidence? How do you, despite those challenges, how would you tell girls to build their confidence in terms of finance?
Be prepared, really. I mean, be prepared and then be confident. But it doesn't make it easy because you feel that tension
Right.
when but you have to, as far as learning those types of things, educate yourself, reading the paper, stay informed. When you're going to a meeting, understand the topics, know what questions you need to ask so that you don't have to feel uncomfortable with your confidence because it's due to the fact that you prepared. And then it's a good thing. The advantage that many women have that I found, which is interesting because it's opposite of what we're told women are emotional. But I find in a tense situation, women tend to be in business less emotional than their male counterparts.
Hmm.
They're less likely to make
Right.
an ego-based decision or get so upset about something that they kind of sidetrack themselves, and that has proven to be an advantage.
That's actually really interesting because I completely agree with that. I think there definitely is this kind of like egotistical nature that men kind of sometimes possess. And that's really interesting that you said about. I never thought about that. I understand that you're trying to change the status quo in the industry. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of making changes in the boardroom, investing in employee development, starting a micro lending fund that is aimed at women and minority owned businesses that do not qualify for banking lending? I know that those are some of the things that you had mentioned to me before. Can you talk a little bit about that and your passion about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I love working at a community bank, and one of the reasons I love doing that is because you have a lot more flexibility than you do if you work for a large institution where you just have to follow the rules, and someone either can is acceptable from a credit perspective or they're not. At a community bank, when a customer comes in and maybe they don't have their credit score isn't where it should be, or maybe it's a newer business and you're not quite sure about the industry. I mean, you see these people out in your community. Your kids go to the same schools. You get a chance to actually know the customers and to really have a better sense on what the risk is in making a loan to those individuals. And so the micro lending fund that you mentioned is something that I haven't announced publicly yet, but that's I guess until now. But that's an initiative that we're starting this year, and we've set aside funds to seek out, open to everyone, but primarily women and minorities that can't get a lending relationship because there's just a little hair on the deal. There's something that's not quite right, but maybe they've got a great idea, or maybe they just need that last piece of equipment, or they need a little bit of money to help carry them through from a payroll perspective. And my goal is to be able to identify those people and kind of give them that boost up so that we can provide a loan to them, help them better their credit, and make them bankable so that they can grow their business and give them that chance that they don't always receive. And additionally, we'll be providing them some mentorship with a loan officer that's going to say, okay, here's where you are now, and here's what you need to do to become bankable. So I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. What do you look for, just out of curiosity, in an individual who, let's say, wants to be a part of that program and who wants that mentorship? What what kind of person, what qualities do you look for?
Well, first of all, the business has to be a viable business idea because you don't want to set them up to fail. If what they have it's not going to work, you're going to have to still, move on to something else. But as far as in an individual, it's someone that has the tenacity to stay after what their goal is and to do whatever it takes. Someone that's willing to listen to the guidance that will be provided. Sometimes you get people that are very focused, but they're so focused that they can't see anyone else's opinion, and that is not usually a formula for success. So, we'll be looking for, how far away are they from achieving that success, and do they have the ingredients necessary to get it if we were to provide them the additional funding.
Can you also talk a little bit about the program that you're putting in place to diversify board members and why you think that that's important?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important because the board that's the group of people that makes the decisions on who to loan to, right? So they need to reflect the diversity and the gender disparity of the community that we're working in because I think that's very important. So since I joined the bank 3 years ago, at that time there were no women or minorities on the board. Now that's not a good historical representation of the institution, which is in its 40th year and has only had four CEOs and two of them have been women. But since that time, there are now five either women or minorities on the board. and that represents, out of 9 people. And we're going to continue to look to make sure that we're furthering that. And that's really important, because if you want to change the dynamic, you have to start by taking one small step. I look at the industry in Michigan, and there are approximately 80 financial institutions in the state of Michigan, and 7 have women CEOs. And, that's less than 10%. Um, the good news is that there's at least double that are chief financial officers. So it means that the talent pool is building, and there may be more future opportunities to put women in those senior roles. But you look and you say, if each woman who holds a position like that right now were to find one person to bring in as an executive over the course of their career over the next couple of years, you'd double the amount of, you'd get up to 20% instead of 10. So it's everyone's responsibility. We can't talk about it and say, oh, well, you know, that's too bad and there's nothing we can do about it. We all are responsible, like you're being responsible by hosting this podcast. You're bringing it to everyone's attention and kind of calling people out and say, well, what are you doing? And we all are responsible to make the change. And if we want it to get better, it's got to start by how we run our own businesses. And with the influence and the roles that we have, we've got to use that to advantage the community and advantage the cause.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for coming on. I really appreciate all of your insight and everything that you had to say. I think that you definitely did inspire a lot of people today, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for what you're doing. And I'm real excited to see the many successes that you have in your future.
Thank you. Hi guys, welcome to today's Mia's Money Matters segment. Today it's actually going to be a bit broader, a little bit more relaxed and not as structured, but I want to talk to you guys about some investing tips. You can go to a lot of places to find investing tips, but these are just my personal investing tips that I would give to someone who is not a professional. But these are just things that I would say to any individual who is starting off and who knows virtually nothing, because this is kind of where I started. And honestly, I've stolen a little bit of this information from my dad, who has kind of taught me everything that I know and bits and pieces from the internet. So I've just learned a lot, and I kind of just want to project that knowledge onto anyone who cares to listen. My main tip is to save your money. And I know that that sounds like obvious, but it's really honestly making money. If you're saving money, you're making money. Because think about it like this. Let's say you spend $50 every week on arbitrary random things. Then you're each week having negative income. If you think about it, you have a negative income coming out of your bank account, but if you save that, it piles up and it becomes positive income. You could just think about it like that, and that's how I choose to think about it. Also, it makes it seem like you have a lot more money than you actually do when you're just saving every little bit of money that you have. It really, really does help. Something that I would also say is, like, anytime you get a check for your birthday or anytime someone gives you money, cash especially, save it as much as possible and think about what you're spending. Be super mindful about it. And it helps in the long run. It helps in the long run because you can cultivate all that money and then invest it into a stock. And that money can obviously work for you, like we've talked about in the past. I think that the stock market is super intimidating and it can be kind of hard to know where to start, but a big tip of mine is to not try and reinvent the wheel, especially when you're starting out. Don't look for things that you think are going to jump up super high. Going for what you know is going to work is super, super important. Invest in safe stocks. Safe stocks obviously do tend to be more expensive because a lot of people invest in them. However, they are safe as you're technically guaranteed to make money. I go on Yahoo Finance, spend 30 minutes a day reading articles, read as much as you can, and you will find the stocks that are being talked about as much. You're going to see articles like top 5 stocks to invest in when starting out, or go follow Warren Buffett's stock portfolio. That's what I did when I started out, because I would see him all the time on CNBC and I would see him on the news, and I thought he was the coolest. I was like, oh my gosh, he knows everything. He's like the connoisseur of everything stock related. So I, went on Yahoo Finance and I saw his, the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio, and I just, followed it. And then I would look into all the stocks that he owned, and I would research the ones that kind of stuck out to me, the ones that I felt like these particular stocks I feel like are going to do good. Then you look at those stocks, you do your research, you can look it up, you can literally find everything that there is to know about a public company, especially on Yahoo Finance, and then just start building your own portfolio. So you can build a watch list portfolio on Yahoo Finance, and it kind of simulates what would actually happen if you were to invest that money, and it shows what stocks are going up in a day and what stocks are going down. And it's so easy because if you want to see where your stock is, you just click on your portfolio and see how it's doing in relativity to the overall market, which is super, super cool. Some safe stocks that I would just throw out there, in my personal opinion, are stocks like Apple, Procter & Gamble, and Walt Disney Company. All these stocks have been extremely safe. They have all been on the upward trajectory for years now since they've gone public. So that's, what I would suggest. Obviously, stocks do, depending on the overall market. If the overall market is down, those stocks will obviously go down as well. However, those stocks are typically on a general upward trend. So those are all very safe. Something that's kind of interesting and maybe a little bit more motivating, if none of this sounds interesting to you, is that $1,000, if you invested $1,000 in August of 2011, it would be worth basically $11,000, or a 999.37% gain, as of August 31st, 2021, and it's obviously still going up. So your money went times 10 and you literally did nothing. So I think that can be a little bit inspiring. Like, think about right now, let's say you're 15, if you invested in a stock, you never know what it's going to be 10 years from now. And that is super inspiring to me, and that's kind of exciting to me because that in the back of your head your money is kind of working for you. You can kind of do whatever you want to do, yet know that you still have money that is working behind the scenes, which is super cool and inspiring, and it makes me really excited to continue to do this. Thank you so much. I'm really happy that I got to talk to all of you guys about this. Have a good one. Bye.